Okay, Catherine, it is so clear that Jack Smith has absolutely had it. It seems like he is trying to just protect his case here. He sees that it's in danger and right now, highly unlikely, will go to trial before this election. What do you think of Smith's move, and could it backfire on him?
It's a good move because he has faced the reality that as long as this case is with this judge, it will probably never go to trial. It definitely is not going to trial before Election Day. So it's also easy because Jack Smith will probably never have to appear before this judge again. It's sort of unheard of for a lawyer, particularly a prosecutor, to in writing accuse a judge of basically not knowing the law and being fundamentally flawed in her legal premise. He's probably correct because everyone who has reviewed, the willful retention of national defense information, which 32 counts, that's what Donald Trump is charged with. Everyone, any legal scholar, any legal practitioner will tell you the Presidential Records Act has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is not a defense. That is a civil law. It is about the presidential records being part of the public, and when the president leaves office, they should be sent to the National Archives. Willful retention of national defense information is a crime. And certainly the Presidential Records Act is not a defense to obstruction of justice or trying to delete security footage, which also Donald Trump is accused of.
Can you break down for us, Lisa, exactly what the situation is with Judge Cannon's jury selection instructions and why Smith is just so fired up about it?
Well, first of all, Steph, we don't have a trial date yet, and yet she ordered them to put in proposed jury instructions. Usually, as Catherine and I both know, when you do propose jury instructions in a trial, you're very close to your trial date, and the jury instructions cover all sorts of issues in the case and evidence.
So what would be the reason to do this?
Because she would like to put this issue off, not have to decide it on the law, and make it something that the jury can decide. But of course, if this becomes an issue for the jury, and the jury is already seated by the time she gives this instruction, the federal government has no avenue to appeal. And that's why Jack Smith is so angry. He's essentially saying, you can't hold this issue over our heads and leave us in a position where the jury is seated, impaneled. There is no opportunity for us to contest it. Once that jury is in their seats, get it over with now. If we're going to appeal, we'd like to do it now.
Catherine, our friend Andrew Weissman thinks that if an appeal on this thing gets to the 11th Circuit, it's going to reverse Cannon and she'll end up bounced from this case.
I don't know if she'll be bounced from the case, but I do believe they will reverse her because she is clearly wrong on this issue of this jury instructions. They've already reversed her twice. Now, the bouncing...
Reversed her and condemned her.
Which is, I would say, bouncing from the case, they might go back to that and say, we've reversed you twice, this is repeated, you clearly cannot be fair and impartial to the government. You have to be fair and impartial to both sides. And it could be an argument to be made that she has her finger on the scale in favor of the defendant, in this case, Donald Trump.
Her finger, possibly her fist, maybe her whole arm, a left foot as well, possibly. Okay, Mark, most people out there have lives to live. They do not understand the legal ins and outs of all of this. They don't have Lisa Rubin on speed dial like we luckily do. How many Americans do you think are watching all of these trials and basically just rooting for their side, regardless of the evidence?
That's a great question. I think probably those who are paying attention to these, I think that is a predominating sort of view people are looking at. I think they're looking at it probably through an election context, through a political context. And it's kind of a sad state of affairs, but it's also it's just such a noise thing at this point. I mean, there are so many cases, there are so many complexities. I mean, a lot of this stuff is pretty turgid to begin with and hard for people to follow. I think, though, the basic contours of this are the broad Trump strategy, no matter what the case is just delay. And it seems like, certainly with Judge Cannon, he has a willing partner here. And you're right. I mean, some of the kind of hedging steps that she was doing to sort of rule on two sort of different circumstances, it was just designed to drag this out, and it seemed completely unworkable. And obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but it certainly didn't seem to make any sense on that front. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point, it's just sort of people watching the clock, and it's just another dimension folded into the wrinkles of the election season.
Lisa, I learned a new term today that I have to ask you about. In Jack Smith's filing, right, he refers to seeking a writ of mandamus. Yes. I just love the way that sounds, but It seems to me it basically means that a higher court gets to tell the judge, do your job.
Correct.
Is that right?
And it's referred to as an extraordinary form of relief in the Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure because it's not an ordinary appeal. You ask for a writ of mandamus when you can't get an appeal to be heard midway through a case. It's the only way that you can get an appellate court to say to a trial judge, you must do this midway through a case where the issue being appealed isn't ordinarily one that gets appealed until the end of the case. And that's why Jack Smith is saying, I will seek a writ of mandamus where the 11th Circuit tells you exactly what to do, because otherwise I couldn't appeal this at any point in the case.
It's clearly a new word for me. I can't even pronounce it. Just last month, Judge Cannon seemed skeptical of Donald Trump's claim that he declared the documents in question personal under the Presidential Records Act. Is there any good reason for Trump's motion to dismiss to still be sitting on her desk, Catherine?
No, there isn't. And there are other motions that are also sitting on her desk. That's also another reason.
Got a lot of paper on that desk.
That's also another reason why the government, Jack Smith, has sort of had it with her. And also, the government has investigated that claim that he designated these documents as personal and found it to be a pure fiction. They interviewed White House officials who worked for him and said it never happened.
Mark, there is absolutely no way Judge Aileen Cannon is completely unaware of these other Trump trials going along with the other threats and the rhetoric. How might that affect how she's handling her case? And what's amazing, she seems to be the only judge in America that he doesn't go after.
Yeah, it is. It's a shocking coincidence, isn't it? I mean, it is bizarre. I mean, I think what is bizarre is that she clearly has to have some level of self-awareness here, if not shame, about how this looks for her. I mean, like, look, obviously, she is a Trump-appointed judge. I don't know, maybe she feels some pressure that way, but I mean, she's a serious judge. I mean, she been to law school and everything. I mean, she has to have an idea. I think at this point, at least from the outside, it looks like she's just way in over her head and is trying to sort of hope that this kind of gets lost in the noise and that no one notices. And really, she's sort of taking shelter in the larger blur of cases going on. And by the way, I didn't want to get out of this segment without being able to say writ of mandamus like everybody else. So I just want to feel included here.
It's like, I want that to be my new nickname. Lisa, what do you think about this?
It should be.
I think Aileen Cannon, to Mark's point, is somewhat over her head. At the same time, I am as baffled as many people are that we got to this point. Aileen Cannon came to this job with real credentials.
Are you really baffled? Give me a break.
No, I am sort of baffled, and I'll tell you why. Aileen Cannon was a federal prosecutor before she took this job. She held that job for a number of years. She also went to reputable law schools, worked at a very reputable law firm. I will confess, it's the one I came from right before I came to MSNBC. She's not a person who is a joke in terms of on paper. The fact that she is, to Catherine's point, now drowning in paper either bespeaks sort of incompetence and a level of anxiety and distrust in herself, or a thumb or an elbow on the scale, as you posited. What's really difficult about this, though, is when we talk about Aileen Cannon recusing herself, there is no basis for recusal that plainly says delaying so much so that the government can't get a trial is a basis for recusal. There are all sorts of recusal standards about, for example, financial interests. But the only sort of recusal standard that this fits into is being overly prejudiced against one party or the other. It's very hard to characterize delay as prejudice, particularly when there's nothing to appeal, when you don't make
maybe
decisions.
She's drowning in paper because she's swimming the backstroke at Mar-a-Lago on the weekends. I mean, she has clearly shown extraordinary deference to Donald Trump from day one.
She has, and she's shown deference to facts that even Donald Trump doesn't allege. When we talk about the Presidential Records Act, Donald Trump has never flatly said, I designated these records as personal. He said, I could have, and by taking them, that in and of itself was a designation. But note that even his lawyers don't say that there was a designation by him of all of these classified materials and national defense documents as personal to him. The fact that she would then have jury instructions on that and let that issue go to a jury without either being right on the law or having any such evidence in front of her is really mind-boggling.
All right, let's move on to the hush money trial, because Judge Merchan just expanded the gag order yesterday, and then today Donald Trump is reposting articles attacking Merchan's daughter again. How is this not a violation of the gag order? Like, I would think in any other situation, that person would be in serious trouble.
And Lisa and I were just discussing this. If it is not a violation, it's as close as you can get to being a violation. No, he's not the one who's saying these negative things about the daughter or the wife. But
he's
he
posting
posted
someone else's article?
Yeah, he reposted. There's a photo of his daughter and Tish James.
Potato, semantics.
So
Right, but the order itself says you can't make or direct others to make statements. And so semantics are our life's blood stuff as lawyers, right? We parse words for a living. Donald Trump is sitting there figuring out how he can exploit any minor loophole and then doing just exactly that. And that is pernicious.
And crappy.
Yes.
He's poking
and dangerous.
Then what? Right? He's poking the bear. He's poking the bear. What could Merchan do? Because he's still the judge presiding over this trial.
Yeah, and he wants to show that he's impartial and he's fair. I just want to point something else out tonight that happened this evening. Our colleague Tom Winter at NBC News is reporting that in Lancaster, New York, a man has had charges filed against him for calling in terroristic threats to two people who have also been big actors in these cases against Donald Trump. One, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General. The other, Judge Arthur Engoron, who presided over Tish James's civil fraud trial. The consequences of Donald Trump's threats are real. They are vivid. They are things like this man in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, now being held in custody for these kinds of threats. There are consequences when Donald Trump does these things. And the more that his lawyers and he say, this is all just part of pointing out that Judge Merchan is a biased actor here, we have evidence to the contrary. It exists tonight.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.